I would agree that the emotions were experienced by
Yeah.
the person. But when it comes to who's responsible for those feelings, ultimately they happened within you, and therefore you are responsible for them. Like at the most truest basis, like foundational level, when we get into consent and domain, you are responsible for your feelings. You have a right to feel them. You have every right to experience your feelings, but you're also responsible for your feelings. Welcome to the Do You Feel Heard podcast, a production of Helping the Herd. Helping the Herd is committed to empowering individuals to liberate themselves from the patterns that keep them from creating their ideal life. If you like this podcast, visit helpingtheherd.com to find resources and personalized coaching to empower you to be your best self. Welcome, everyone, to the Do You Feel Heard podcast. This week is a special week, just Derrick and I, no guests, just the two of us opening up, talking about things that are present and alive in our lives, and hopefully in a way that is beneficial to you, the listener. So welcome, everyone. Welcome, Derrick. What's up, man?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Good to be here. Good to be back. Thanks for holding it down while I was out on vacation in Oregon. Excited to hear the pod I missed with you and Dawson, right?
Yeah, Dawson stepped in as the guest co-host, and we interviewed Aaron. You remember Aaron Sawyer? He
Yeah.
used to edit our
Oh,
podcast. He's
nice.
also a very talented battle rapper and lyricist.
Yeah.
One day, I'd love to get the two of you together to write some rhymes together. You are also a infamous
Infamous.
lyricist. So, yeah, I think that'd be cool. Cool collab one day.
Infamy is greater than fame. That's what I think. I would love to. I can't wait to hear it now. Aaron's a hoot. And yeah, we'll have to get him back on. But yeah, no, I'm excited to dive in. I'm glad it's just us today. Yeah, we were talking a bit before we recorded about some things we're going through. Any place you want to kick us off, Ian?
Sure. The topic that was inspiring us before we hit the record button was the subject of having an experience with someone who maybe feels like you can't reach them. In this specific example, we were talking about when someone else has a belief or a is attached to a perception of how something happened that doesn't match yours, but they're not in a place where they're willing to hear your perspective or your experience because it might or definitely will contradict their own. And what do you do with that? How do you get back to that person? How do you restore harmony? How do you restore that connection with that person when you are living in two disconnected realities? And that's kind of where we were.
Yeah, well said. Now, if you're comfortable, do you care to share with the listeners some of the context, some of the real world context in which you're doing so they can better understand what we're talking about, some ground for it?
Sure. So, and I want to first caveat, this isn't the only time that I've experienced this. This person's not an anomaly, but this is just the most recent time that I am experiencing this. But my experience is with someone who has, is carrying hurt from the past, and I witnessed them carrying almost like a bias, a negative bias toward any of the things coming from me. And when they receive anything from me, it's filtered through all of these belief systems that are based on previous experiences where there was no check-in of, hey, this is how I experienced this. Did you experience this the same way? Instead, it's, oh, well, I perceive it this way, so this is the way. And you compound all of those together, and there's a lot of resentment and hostility because they're living a reality that is different than mine. And so we're in constant conflict. Every communication is conflict because they're upset and likely don't feel heard about their experience. But how do you hear an experience that isn't real and is being accused of you, right? Somebody's lodging accusations at you. It's really hard. And the accusations aren't real. They're not maybe not real. The accusation is real, but what they're accusing you of isn't factual, doesn't match your experience, but they're not willing to hear anything that contradicts it. So how do you hear that? How can someone feel heard
Mhm.
when they're accusing you of something that you didn't do, but they're not willing to hear anything other than that reality?
Yeah, yeah. And are you comfortable sharing who this is with?
Sure. This is with my son's mother. I co-parent with her, or we did co-parent fairly well leading up to last year, um, and then there was just a rupture in communication, a
Mm.
rupture in like safety. Ultimately, like
Mm.
I think there was a certain point where they determined that it was no longer a safe place to be open, and that there was a lot of protection, a lot of walls that went up, a lot
Yeah.
of being guarded toward me. And since then, I feel like it's just gotten worse. Like the divide has just grown. They've become further and further away from me as time has gone, and at times it feels like I don't know how to I don't know how to reach them. I don't know how to speak my truth to them in a way that they hear it without all the filters of hurt and resentment and
Yeah.
judgment and assumptions. Like I don't know how to get to that person. Um, so that's
Yeah.
yeah, that's what I'm
Thank
talking
you.
about
Uh,
specifically.
Thank you for sharing. I think the context is so helpful, and I just appreciate you sharing. And I always think about how lucky people who work with you are, and people in like the groups that you're part of, to have someone who has this experience with co-parenting. I think that's a huge, very interesting challenge, and just an incredible undertaking. And just in general, from my experience, having been in a long term relationship and ended it and moved into another relationship, and just how you deal with that dissonance and how do you deal with that old relationship still exists.
Hmm.
You're still, that person's a person, you're connected to that person. Now you're connected to another person, you're connected to thousands of people as well. And, the intimacy of these connections is shifting and changing, and the agreements in them. But it is one heck of a puzzle. And so I want to start because it's so funny whenever you start asking questions, even rhetorically, it's so funny how quickly I try to answer. I have in my mind, I'm just noticing, and this is how, and then I realize, why am I answering? There's not, I don't have the answers. And I want to start with that. There's no answer to these. And the image that came to mind when you're talking about this, what is the path, the answer, if you will, big air quotes for answer, it's a wobbly spiral. It's a
Okay.
very wobbly spiral toward the place you're trying to get to. There's no clear, direct path toward, and let's be clear here, what I'm hearing you say is like the goal maybe for this person, for the mother of your son, would be to connect, see each other clearly, and hear each other and be heard, and have some agreement about reality and seeing each other without all those filters and blind spots and contractions from the past coming up. And I think that path is a wobbly spiral. I think there's not one particular thing, action, word, statement, gesture that gets you there, but a conglomeration, a series, if done well, a wobbly spiral, if you will, a meandering path that slowly those things, in a way that you can't see and can't explain, that slowly those filters come down, that slowly that guarding relaxes. So I'm going to start by saying I have no answer. And that whatever answers we get will be a wobble and a spiral and will always be different. But yeah, that's where I came from first. And I really like how you put it, rupture and injury. I think that's really good words for what we're dealing with here. And it's really relevant to my life right now. I have a knee injury. I mentioned to you before, and it's something I want to talk about because I think the parallel here is just great. Whenever you injure a body part, a lot of the similar things happen as whenever you injure a relationship. Guarding, contraction, and normally the muscles around it might seize up. Like for my knee, maybe they seize up and they're trying to protect the injured part because they're feeling pain and they don't know what to do. So they contract. So there's tightness and stiffness and soreness.
Yeah, you're
Just
also
like
gonna
in,
You're also going to
Mhm.
modify how you do things. You're going to modify how you
Hmm.
move. You're going to
That's right.
modify how you engage with that part of yourself to protect it. So you're not going to do things
That's
you
right.
normally would. You're going to start changing your behaviors as a way to protect that thing.
Exactly, compensating, and there's a well-known phenomenon of compensation injuries where if you have an injury, let's say with your knee, and you walk
Right.
a funny way to protect it, then you get an injury with your hip because your hip's going in an unnatural way to compensate. And so that's what we're doing all the time with this web of relationships, I think, is there's a rupture and injury in one, and then we compensate in some other area with an activity or another relationship, and then
In an
that
effort
gets
to
out of
protect.
balance
Right. In
in
an
an
effort to
effort.
protect, we unintentionally can cause harm to ourselves, trying to protect ourselves.
That's right. The path to hell is paved with good intentions. It really is. It really is. So we're trying to protect, we're trying to help. And so, yeah, I feel like the first step with this person is creating safety, reestablishing safety and trust when it's been lost. And that one's definitely a wobbly spiral. Like there's no way you just like I say these words and I make this gesture and now you trust me again and
Right.
I trust you. Never gonna happen, right? So yeah, how do you establish that safety and trust back again to where it's even possible to let those filters down that you're talking about and kind of that negative bias that's skewing everything that's said. Yeah, I don't know. Where do you go from there? How do you start to establish that safety and how have you probably tried so far? I'm
Yeah,
sure you
man. I mean,
have.
that's the question of the hour. How do you do that? How do you create that safety? How do you reach that person? And this is where it gets tricky. I mean, I first want to just put out there how incredibly difficult for any co-parent it is, because most of the time when a relationship ends, you have the luxury, if you choose so, if there's hurt, if there's uncomfortable traumas that you're carrying, you can just, all right, see you later. Don't let the
Yeah.
door hit you on the way out. Best of luck to you. I don't ever have to talk to you again or acknowledge that you exist. And how relieving that must feel
Wow.
in that moment of just letting it go. Goodbye. And move on with your life. Whereas with co-parents, you don't have that luxury. In fact, not only can you not say goodbye, you must interact with them. You must engage with them in some way if you want to be involved in that child or children's lives. Like, you don't get to just wipe it away. And so there's typically two paths. Either you just ignore and pretend like none of those things ever happened, and you keep it kind of fake and cordial and okay, here's the time and whatever, and you never acknowledge all of the things underneath. Or you've got to do the messy, sticky, difficult process of processing with someone who you no longer love in the way that you once did, but must figure out a way to get along for the sake of the child. And I mean, hopefully a tiny bit it will benefit you. So I hope there's some level of like for the sake of yourself and for the sake of the other person, because it will have
Yeah.
residual benefit. Um, but often the priority is for the children's sake. We've got to figure out a way to, exist in the same place without attacking each other. Um, and so,
Yeah.
with that being said, every person is different. Every communicator, every person communicates differently. Everyone has different attachment styles, communication styles, human design. Like, people are complex and have different ways of even thinking. Like, people look at the same math problem, like a great example, a little, deviation from what we're talking about, but like if I tell you what's 3 times 6, you might do 6 plus 6 plus 6 in your head, or you
Mm.
might have memorized what those things are, or maybe you end up doing you break down into the factors, or whatever. Like, my
Yeah.
son likes to break things in half, so 4 times 6 would have been a better example. So he'll be like, okay, well, that's 12 times 2, so I'm going to do that math because that's faster than 6 plus 6 plus 6 plus 6, or however you get there. And so just also baseline recognizing that everyone thinks differently. Nobody looks
Yeah.
at the same problem the
Yeah.
same way. And so you're asking me how my approach. I'm very pragmatic. I am a very
Yeah,
like,
you
let's
are.
dissect stuff. I want to see exactly how it was. How did it happen? Let's lay it all out. And so, like, my dream scenario to resolve this issue would be going line by line, chronologically. Let's find where we lost it. Where did things get off the rails? And let's start identifying all the places where you saw this and believed this, but the truth was closer to this. And then it kept going this way when really it was here. And so we just kept getting further and further from the truth. Let's find all those little ruptures so we can start to maybe undo some of that rupture, some of that, disconnection that happened from not checking in after each one of those instances. Hey, this was my experience and this was hurtful. Let's figure out what happened here rather than taking the hurt and piling on the hurt every time. And then before you know it, now this person's a bad person who you have to protect yourself from because you didn't seek their side. You didn't want to know what happened for them.
Totally. I can really empathize with you here. I'm also pretty pragmatic, and line by line really spoke to me. And I also heard probably more, though anyone, but probably more of our female listeners may be laughing at that one because I think there's definitely, and it's not just male female, but there's differences between rational and other ways of seeing the world, and reason is one of them. Just like you're saying with math, like there's not one right way to do the multiplication problem. While I do think reason's incredibly valuable, it's not the only way. Of course, it doesn't make any sense. It's not reasonable for reason to be the only way. As much as it's one of the master values for me, it really is. It's a really good one for just what we're talking about, getting to ground a baseline reality that we can agree upon. Because there are things like facts, there are, things that are evidence, that you can use the scientific method. No, I did say this and all this. But what you're getting at is the idea that feelings are valid, and the feelings did happen at each event rupture, whether you guys agree about what happened or not. Each of you both experienced feelings. Those are valid. Those carried over. Those created your karma, your momentum moving forward. And now you're here, and now you have to either go line by line and dissect all of those events and figure out what really happened and come to shared agreements, or at the same time process all those emotions. And I feel like those are kind of contradictory. I feel like one gets in the way of the other, as soon as you start getting into, I think this is what you're probably butting your head against, right? Is once you get into the facts at all, the emotions get so high, and the real emotions that were there, still there, probably get in the way of any kind of line by line analysis. Is that right?
Yeah, I think the blame game is often really important to avoid, like who's responsible for the experience, because like if you're so focused on wanting someone else to take responsibility, you can lose sight of the fact that, I mean, see, this is so tricky. This is a good conversation. So you said the phrase, the emotions are valid, right? And that's a common, phrase that's handed out a lot.
They're at least real. I'll at least say they happened. I'm not,
Right.
that's
Okay.
what I mean
So,
by valid. I want to be clear that the emotions happened. They are there. They're real.
right. So I would agree with that. I would agree that the emotions were experienced by
Yeah.
the person. But when it comes to, yeah, who's responsible for those feelings? Ultimately, they happened within you, and therefore you are responsible for them. Like at the most truest basis, like foundational level, when we get into consent and domain, you are responsible for your feelings. You have a right to feel them. You have every right to experience your feelings, but you're also responsible for your feelings. There's like plenty of old proverbs where like, someone walks up to a monk and kicks him in the shin, and like that the the monk could say, I'm experiencing this pain, this hurt, this frustration, whatever, because you did this thing, so it's your fault. But also the monk has the ability to recognize that the person who kicked him in the shin, it's not about him. He's not going to take it personally, and he's going to feel love and compassion for the person who kicked him rather than feeling whatever. And so in that way, that person, the monk in this analogy, they're responsible for how they feel about their experience. They're responsible for that. And so it gets tricky when somebody feels hurt about something and then projects responsibility for that hurt onto someone else, and then is basically, unwilling to move on until that other person takes responsibility for that experience that they had. And now you're in a little bit of a standstill or a stalemate because that person isn't responsible. So how are they going to take responsibility for something that they're not responsible for? And if you can't move on until you do that, how do you move on?
Yeah, no, well laid out. No, that was clear. And the responsibility part's really a good one. That was a great example. Because earlier we were talking about if someone's not ready to wake up, they're not going to wake up. And it's a little convoluted of a thing to explain and to say what you mean. And, what's waking up? Am I awake? Are you awake? Are we waking up? Is it a continuum? But responsibility is a little more simple. I like it. I like responsibility. Can you take responsibility for your experience as it is now, what you're feeling, what you're experiencing, what you did feel, and then just take maximal responsibility for your ability to change your life, to move it wherever you want it to go, and to stop blaming others for where you are, or blaming past versions of yourself for where you are. That's like self-hatred, self-blame, or blaming others, blaming your old partner. That's why I'm hurt. Or like the Buddhist monk, there is pain. I have compassion. There is compassion for the person hurting who kicked me. There is pain. It's something that simple. Can you just maintain your aura? Keep that sphere of influence around you as yours? That's an interesting one. How do you get people to stop, disempowering themselves? We've had a lot of episodes on this. That's why, empowerment has become kind of a through line, because just what we're getting to here, when you cut underneath some of these problems, I wouldn't have thought about responsibility, as we started this conversation, but now I'm seeing it as a pretty clear through line there. How do you get someone empowered to where they take responsibility for their own life? That's different. It's a different question than where we started, but it's all related.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. Responsibility is a huge piece of this, and accountability, I think, is the cousin to responsibility. I think that holding yourself accountable more than you hold others accountable, because others are responsible for holding themselves accountable. And so if you're spending more of your time trying to make others accountable for things, I think you're going to suffer more than if you focus on your own accountability. What can you hold yourself accountable for within your experience? What can you do about your experience? Because if you're looking at how you co-created or created your experience, you then have perspective that you can use when you create the next experience.
That's right.
And if you're focused on how others are creating your experience, we've gone through this many times in this podcast, but you can't make anyone do anything. You can't make anyone change. You can't make anyone grow. All you can do is control you and what you do, how you show up, how you respond, all of these things. And so if you're really focused on holding others accountable, who do you think you are? Are you the bringer of karma? Are you karma itself? And you need to be the one responsible for others getting, back to them what they put out? Or are you, a divine being who is here to work out their dharma and learn what they can learn and do whatever they're supposed to do here, but focus on that experience, focus on what you can control, which is you. At the end of the day, there's not much else you can control besides you. So,
that's right. And that's freedom. It's wild that it's freedom, but it's also terrifying. It's also the weight of that power is terrifying. I think being afraid of your own greatness is a real phenomenon. It's not like an ego trip. I'm so great. It's like we all are. And we all, I think, live in some state of fear of that greatness. With great power comes great responsibility. And it's, they're all just part of the same thing. So I do think this issue with taking responsibility leads to this feeling of feeling trapped. You feel trapped by all the people and situations around you and past you that created this thing, and you don't feel like you have the ability to create the future moving forward. And then you're trapped. And that's where you start hurting others. That's where a lot of this stuff comes from. This conflict, pain, suffering, the things that we overall try to help others avoid, try to keep people from experiencing. So with that, I think it becomes a really interesting one of how do you get someone to see things a different way? How do you allow for curiosity? Again, we talked about safety being one of the first ones, and I think that safety has to be there for vulnerability to then come in. With vulnerability, I think that's one of the things we're maybe most scared of, actually, more than even our own power, is feeling totally powerless and what that actually means for us. What does it mean if we actually open up and feel the hurts from these wounds? And I don't know exactly what wounds you had, but I know that I've, experienced relational wounds that have left me, crying and open and just destroyed is what it feels like. So that kind of vulnerability to cry in front of, let's say, that person, how do you cultivate that? And I think that's needed to do that work you're talking about of working backwards and dealing with all those ruptures, all those areas where things went off. I think those emotions probably need to be processed in some way, and you can't know what that'll need as you're going through it. So to be with that person and go through that process and be vulnerable to whatever might come up and to see it all clearly together in that moment, that's terrifying, because maybe you'll be left crying, maybe they'll be crying and you're not sure, and you'll feel like you have to comfort them, and then you're crying, and who knows. So yeah, I think that bed of safety can then lead to vulnerability, that can then lead to the kind of dropping off of those filters, to where then maybe someone can actually then take responsibility for things moving forward and drop some of those narratives. So we're slowly getting a wobbly spiraling path over to where we're going. But not easy to do. I just really feel for that situation. It's a lot. That's a lot of steps to walk back and look at with vulnerability and openness and curiosity and safety. And to do that, that's probably why a mediator or someone else is often going to be helpful for this, because unless one of you is completely, evolved, words that aren't, really has a lot of space. One of you would have to really have a lot of space to see and hear everything that the other person's saying. But I do think that is kind of how those unravel, right? I'm curious how you think you can get someone to drop those stories and things. You can't get them. How can you create the space for someone to drop those stories?
I was about to Ram Dass you.
You're about to get me. How do you give them the space? Yeah. Because I feel like I'm thinking of the Ram Dass. I'll give that one example just because you mentioned him. He was talking about someone just talking about all their hurts and pains and oh, my daughter, she does all this and you don't understand my suffering. And he just listens and then, says, I hear you. Something similar to that. She's like, no, you don't understand. He still looks content and equanimous. And I think she's trying to see her pain reflected. She wants something, but he's just allowing it, giving it the space. And so she says it all again. It goes into even more detail. I hear you. And it's such a Ram Dass, such an aso, such an equanimity toward experience that I do think is somewhat inherently healing. But we can't do that all the time, you know. So yeah, unless you have a personal Ram Dass, you can be as your conflict mediator, who can just sit there and take it all. Yeah, how do you go about navigating that and creating those spaces for someone to let go of things?
I'll answer your question now. So the Ram Dass that example that I was going to give is different than that one. One of the things that stood out to me from his storytelling was he got pulled over by like a state trooper or something, and apparently they're notorious in where he's from. They're notoriously unkind and rigid and very firm. And when he got pulled over, he was like, okay, essentially, like, I recognize that I can't make this person feel any way or do anything. All I can do is create the space where they can like drop the there's you and there's me. You can drop all of that because the space that Ram Dass was holding at that time was one where it was safe to let that go. Let that, you know, essentially it's a protection mechanism, right? I have to protect me, self-preservation, ego, I need to stay alive. Like that's what's like the underlying root. But when you let go of that and recognize that we are all one and we are all connected, like there's less of a need to separate and protect ourselves because we're all protecting each other to a degree. And
That's
so
right.
like that's kind of where my mind goes, which is way easier said than done, as most things. Of ultimately what I think would best serve us, me and my son's mother in this situation, is for me to be able to hold the space myself in a way that creates not so much safety, but a lack of threat, so that there can be room for safety. And I'm not
Yeah.
saying that I am doing that perfectly.
It's a
it,
big ask.
it's
It's
a
a
very
really big
difficult
ask.
situation to be in, and things have happened, and hurts. I've now sustained hurts, and I'm trying to overcome those
Hmm.
and move forward in a way where my hurts are not coming out or coming through in my communication toward her. Making sure that I'm actively making sure I'm not retaliating. That's one of, I think, the worst things that I can do, and it's a pattern that I had when I was younger that I'm still working very hard to let go of. Is, oh, well, you did this to me, well, I'm going to do this to you. Like, you made me hurt, so now I'm going to make you hurt, kind of a thing. And I've come a very long way with it, but the where I'm at in my journey is I don't retaliate, but I still feel the urge to, like, ooh, this will make me feel better if I do this. I'll get them back for this, that kind of energy. I'm not acting on it, but I feel it. I feel it, the impulse to do that. And so that's part of the work. That's part of my active work when I'm engaging with
Yeah.
this person is, okay, don't retaliate. How can I communicate whatever it is in a way that's just neutral? It just is, and it's not charged. There's no resentment. There's no like emotional things being inserted into my speech. It's matter of fact. It's nonviolent communication, and presented in a way where there is room for love. Ultimately, is what I would love to have in the space.
That's right. I love that you brought up nonviolent communication. That's where I was going to go next. Because everything you're saying is super valid. And I think we both struggle with this, where we're lucky. We live in a timeline where there's been a Buddha, right, of some kind, whatever your definition is of that. And we have some of the tools to embrace equanimity, which is a lot of what you're saying, equanimity. This unified mindfulness training that I'm doing now, it's the whole kit and caboodle is about equanimity. And I just love bringing that into every sense precept, what you see, what you hear, what you feel. And then you can start bringing it into situations. And yeah, if you could just hear all those things and meet it with an unconditional, loving awareness. Like you said, love is kind of what comes up with equanimity. We don't have to get into and explain that right now, but we talked about it previously. But it somewhat is. that's what I think it was. Is it Carl Rogers? I think it was Carl Rogers. I might be I think it's Carl Rogers who famously did the experiment with like a troubled youth, where they would just sit there, basically doing meta. They had different words for it, but basically just giving unconditional positive regard is what they called it toward that person, and not forcing anything. And over time, without, first the kid maybe just drew or just was sullen, and then maybe they played with the toys that were in the room, but without the therapist, Carl Rogers, doing anything, just showing up with unconditional positive regard, that person started to heal. That child started to heal and started to open up and talk. And that was, it's cited as a pretty decent bit of evidence toward the healing power of that, of just a positive, accepting space. And that's what we're talking about here. And who doesn't want to show up like that for their partner, especially, or for their ex-partner, for someone they love, someone they care about, who they're trying to connect with? And it's not that easy. And for us, it's going to be the hardest people sometimes to do that with, will be those people. And so I think nonviolent communication is a really good place to start for how are we going to try, if we're going to try, while giving ourselves a lot of grace for not doing it. What I'm hearing that could be really useful from nonviolent communication is Rosenberg's method of looking beneath whatever's said at the feelings and the needs underneath it. And I think, depending on how many times you've been through this, rabbit hole with the mother of your son, it might even become easier and easier, or harder and harder, to do that. But when they say something that's, let's say, factually untrue, that really gets you, I wonder if you're able to see there's the feeling underneath it. Maybe it's anger, resentment, whatever that is, pain, fear, and whatever needs that person is trying to meet with the words that they're spewing at you, with the things that, the separations from reality, let's say, or at least from what you understand reality to be, I think that's one place. I don't know. I think that would help with equanimity a little bit, if you can start seeing on those other levels beneath it and not get caught on the rational line by line, because that's just not where they're at. They're at the feelings or the needs, and the words are just coming up.
Right. Yeah, I guess where I think a lot of people might resonate with this question, and I'm interested to hear your thoughts, is when you have someone who, let's say, is feeling, let me think of a good example here.
Yeah. As much as you're able to, use real examples if you're comfortable with it. I feel like it's helpful.
Sure. Okay. So let's say, okay, so here's a real example. So there was a family trip that I had taken. There was some loose conversation about potentially meeting up at the same place during this trip. So myself, my partner, my son, we went on a road trip, and there were texts about potentially meeting with my son's mother for a day or two so she could get some extra time with our son during that trip. And as we built our trip, and as we put it all together and figured out how much driving there was going to be and how much time there was going to be here at this place and here at this place, it very quickly became evident that there wasn't going to be very much extra time to connect. And so the conversation then shifted to okay, maybe there's one day that we can do something, rather than what would originally be discussed as several days. Now, the entire time, my intention was, I'm going to build my family trip in a way that works for my family, and we're not going to my partner, for instance, had a hard rule of she doesn't want to drive more than 7 hours in a day. So we're going to stop places on the way, which is going to make our trip take longer, but also preserve our mental health and our bodies so that we're not crammed in a car for 13, 15 hours in a day. And so that was one factor that led to less potential time for them to connect while on that trip. But my intention was never to limit that. My intention was to support my partner and my son and myself on this trip so that we're comfortable. So as then everything gets ironed out. The day that we would have been able to connect didn't align. And so we didn't end up connecting them at all during the trip. At no point was she, I mean, to be fair, my son's mother wasn't even in the same state as us as we had originally planned to be, so which made it impossible because she didn't want to drive out there for one day. It wasn't worth it, so it didn't end up panning out. Okay, but from my experience, there was no ill will. There was no like, nothing was intentional, right? Um, and so that was a rupture that still gets brought up of like, taking time. I was accused of taking time away from her, which certainly doesn't match my experience. And technically, the trip happened during my custodial time with him anyway, so it wasn't like it wasn't her time. I was trying to create time, but it didn't work out, despite the best efforts of everybody involved. So then there was a conversation about like when can that time be made up? Since we had talked about her getting extra time, when can we figure out? She sent a message to me like, hey, when can I make up that time? I want to get that time with my son. Now, when she sent that message, the way that it was phrased, I didn't know what she was referring to. She said, when am I making up this time that I lost? And I'm like, what do you mean? What do you mean time that you lost? Like, she's framing it as it was mine and you took it and now it's gone. And my view was that I was giving extra time during my time with him, trying to be supportive and, helpful. And so when I received that message, I was just like, what do you mean? I don't owe you a time. What are you talking about? And then all hell broke loose because now I'm like basically contradicting her reality and accusing her of not having any time while she's living a reality where time was taken from her. And so boom, now we're in conflict. Boom, now we're living two very different realities. And that was one of the big instances of disruption in our ability to co-parent was like that misunderstanding. Now, mind you, I kept asking questions. What do you? I don't want to understand what you mean by this. What do you mean your time? And then once she explained what she was referring to, I'm like, okay, I don't view it in that way as you lost time and I owe it to you, but I am happy to give you time somewhere else. Like, let's figure it out. And we did. She ended up getting more time with him than she would have during that trip, but that doesn't change the hurt or the story of, this person is keeping me from my kid and intentionally minimizing my time. Meanwhile, like, I'm over here like, okay, I'm accommodating, giving you more time than you would have even gotten then, yet I'm still the bad guy. There's still this belief that it was like nefarious, that I was like, trying, I'm have this master plan.
It's easy to happen. It's easy to get villainized, right? We paint. No, thank you for sharing. It's a really good example. You're really bringing up that difficulty with expectations versus reality, right? And whenever you do have an expectation and you start to build toward it, that is real. Expectations are real. Your expectations are real if you plan for something and then it changes. I'm big on this. I have a hard time with, someone says they're going to do something and then things change as they do. Make plans, God laughs, It's just impermanence. It's just part of this thing. And still, my mind will try to, plan and create expectations and grasp. And then I will often be disappointed when things almost inevitably change. So I hear that for both of you. I hear both the expectations and the shifting of reality, and as hard constraints hit, then it seems like what do you think it is? What do you think the feeling is, or the need? Let's go all the way to the need. What's the need outside of all the stories that she's expressing whenever she did this, or how she acted there? What's the need that is there?
Man, that's a great question. What is the need there?
What's the need?
I think, I don't know, honestly. Like, what is the need there? Well, let's start with the feeling, because the feeling is, the the body's way of communicating that there is an unmet need. So the feeling of like fear could be coming from the need for safety and security and stability. I think the feeling of like maybe like almost like betrayal. I think there's a little bit of that of like you betrayed what we agreed
Yeah.
upon.
Injustice is another one I was thinking
Sure,
of that's
that's a
related to
good
that.
one. Yeah, yeah.
Injustice. I heard a lot of fairness. That was my
Hmm.
time once the expectations were put there. And it was in that quasi realm of planning where it wasn't anyone's, court ordered time. It
Sure.
wasn't anything that, you both sign a contract on who's going to be where when. But it was in one person's mind one way, and then it changed. And so the time was stolen out of that middle ground, the ethers, really.
Right.
So fairness, betrayal, injustice, needs
Yeah.
for fairness, feelings of betrayal, needs for justice. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think those things are there.
And then also, I just got to point out the possibility, because we act in these ways which are really weird. There might have been a need for more time, and the way you said that it kind of played out, it sounds like she got more time eventually and used that example as a way to leverage for more time. So maybe if the need, and I have a hard time with need here, but the need to spend time with your child it's a real need. It's also a desire. It's both and. But let's call it a need for now. The need to spend time with your child could lead to behaviors that help you get more of that. And sometimes those behaviors might not be highest self behaviors. Sometimes you might fight dirty. And
Sure.
I find I find it super interesting to try to look at those patterns whenever they're beneath my level of awareness. Because I think I play games like that too and I don't notice. And I'm constantly trying to bring awareness to them. So I stop playing games. I'm not trying to play games in this life. But, I don't like to play games with people unless we all consent. Unless we're playing chess and we agreed on the rules. But I do think that's something that happens beneath the awareness a lot of times. We do something and we don't know why we're doing it. We say something, we don't know why we're saying it. And eventually we might have the opportunity to find out. And maybe she made it into a thing. This is just a possibility. It's of course not reality. Maybe she made it into a thing to gain leverage, to have more leverage in time later. It was serving a future self in a way. So really, complex web of needs across times and across relationships that you're having to navigate. And yeah, it's a great example of it. And if you are trying to work through that trauma, you have a tough task of holding space for all of that and all those possibilities without any reactivity, given that you went through it and had your own issues and pain and whatever there. And yeah, that's why one thing that keeps coming to mind that I just got to throw in here is psychedelic assisted couples therapy as a thing I'm really interested in learning more about. I went to a lot of sessions on it at Psychedelic Sciences Conference in Denver this year, and just fascinating. And I pulled up my notes because thankfully it's in the same notebook I use for taking notes on our podcast here. And I grabbed an old sheet from here. And one of the first things I wrote down some quotes from participants who used this was ketamine or MDMA. It was from both those different ones in separate, not in conjuncture, with therapists. It was couples who used it. And some of the quotes I wrote down were, "It allows me to drop defenses. It allows me to receive." A lot of the things we're talking about here, it's fascinating that one way of facilitating that, I think, is truly downregulating those filters, those blind spots, those protectors. They are looking out to try to protect you and remind you that, like you said, I really like that, we're all protecting each other. Really, we can get there, and we can drop our own protectors and do that. So yeah, I wanted to. I don't know if you're curious talking about. I'm curious if you guys did anything like this. If you're okay talking about that. If you guys tried any psychedelic assisted help with working through this stuff.
No, we have not. There was one suggestion. She's been pretty intimately connected to the world of ayahuasca, She's I don't know the full extent of her involvement with it, but I know that she's led people through that. She's taken it herself, countless times, and yeah, I don't know. And she had suggested at one point that we go into that space together to try to move through things. My resistance to working in that space with her, there were several. One of which is I've not had experience with that specific plant medicine. So
Me
to
neither.
go into that space without experience with it, with the objective of healing big
Yeah.
traumas that she's carrying and that we need to work through, like that was very intimidating.
Yeah.
That was very like daunting. I wasn't comfortable going into that space, especially when I don't have any experience with that plant medicine or what it's going to do to me, and so I was very closed to that idea for for that reason and others.
Yeah.
At this point, the extent to which we've tried to move through this it's been pretty minimal. I mean, my partner has been kind and gracious enough to step in and try to be a part of the conversation, to bring in a third party that doesn't have nearly as much of a stake in the past hurts and traumas that need to be moved through. But that was unsuccessful. And yeah, I mean, it's been difficult because they're not geographically close. And
Yeah.
so it would have to be done virtually, or we'd have to plan specific times to be in the same place. And so logistically, it just
Yeah.
is not an easy task. And so we're at the drawing board right now because things are not getting better. They
Yeah.
continue to deteriorate, and it makes co-parenting damn near impossible with someone who's committed to being against you and not working together. And so it's just like we have to do something. So we're currently on the lookout. We're looking for a facilitator, looking for someone who can hold that space and try to help bridge the gap, and bring us closer to a shared reality rather than two very different ones.
Yeah. Well, first off, good on you for trusting your instinct there. I think going into ayahuasca with that intention would be interesting, and it would need a lot of facilitation and a very, very, very strong container. And I haven't done ayahuasca, but that's not a traditional one used for couples therapy. It's normally used in different realms, normally used to travel to different realms even. So I don't know if it's the one for that, but yeah, I hear you, and I can almost sense some of the exasperation from it. And I hope you feel hopeful for the future. I mean, yeah, hopefully long lives ahead of us all. And love that you're looking for a facilitator now. I think having a strong container, and for you, especially with the geographic, what makes sense would probably be a retreat type setting, where you guys have a weekend, where you have a facilitator, a clear goal, and you have a weekend of experiences, couples therapy, individual therapy, call it therapy, call it talking, call it coaching, whatever you want to call it, but individual work with facilitators who have nothing but your best intention at heart. And then the substances used intentionally together and possibly separate, but especially together in lower doses. They call it psycholytic doses, where people are still more or less themselves, can still talk, they're not, comatose or anything. They are there, but a lot of those defenders are down. They can see they have more open heart. They have that with MDMA. It's more about the open-heartedness. With ketamine, I feel like there's some heart opening, but also more of the just lack of inhibition, lack of defenders there that allow you to say true things and feel things and not be so terrified by them. but both of them I think could be really, really helpful for you. So it's something that, yeah, if I can ever help you with the hookup with that and with finding, people for it, you have to have really good facilitators for that. You got to have people who know how to work with couples and with psychedelics. That was one of the big takeaways they had from there. If they say, if you want to work with couples and psychedelics, you have to be a very good couples facilitator first to be able to hold that space, because you're turning it up to 11. And when you turn the heat up, more can happen. More chemical reactions can happen. It's like turning up the temperature for a chemical reaction. More particles can collide, more good can happen, and more bad. You could have a really real rupture, a real bad rupture, but you can have so much healing too. So I hope you find the way, because it's hard. It's hard whenever you have so much history, and I sometimes do. The reason I brought this up is I kind of think I don't like the word need. We've talked about this a lot, but they're almost needed, I think, sometimes for this stuff, because it is so deep, and we don't always have the time luxury to do hundreds of hours together. And who wants to? Even if you have to co-parent, or if you separated, you're not trying to do hundreds of hours of post-couples therapy to, just be able to see on the same terms. I think the facilitation of psychedelics is actually needed in some situations in this day and age for helping get to where you're trying to get to. And so I hope you have some hope for the future that something will help get these down. There's other paths, of course, but the fact that she's open to it and you're open, something like that could happen one day, and things could really change. And that's the cool thing you hear when you go to these lectures and stuff. You see people who really change. You see couples who change. They even have used them for, they call conscious uncoupling, which I really like the term, when people are starting to split or about to, and want to do it in a conscious way instead of, all right, you're out, and have all this trauma. So yeah, just some things to think about there for the future. Man, but my heart goes out to you. It's not an easy place to be. It's not an easy place to be.
Yeah, I definitely, you're saying you hope I have hope. I definitely have hope, mostly because it simply cannot continue this way. Like, it's just not sustainable to continue moving in the way that we're moving. Yeah. So it has to change. And so with that understanding, like accepting that, again, what we've been doing is not sustainable, so therefore it has to change. Similarly to like the damage we're doing to the planet. Like, it can't continue forever. It has to change. And so once you accept that, then you're in a really great place, because you're looking at, okay, what can we do? What are we going to do? We're looking at options. We're looking at possibilities. We're looking at hope, essentially. We're looking at all the things that could be. And that's a place of alchemy. That's a place of, we're going to create something. We're going to create change. And that's
it's freedom too.
Right.
It's self-responsibility. As soon as you stop telling that narrative of why everything's broken and be like, well, something has to change, and I'm the one who's going to have to change it. At least I'm the one who has to start the process. People may join, but no one's going to do it if not me. That's a real place, of alchemy.
Yeah, it's a place of expansion. We can do more. We can go somewhere. We can create something different. And that's a very empowering energy to be in, versus I'm a victim, nothing's the way I want it to be, this person's hurt me so much, and they're bad, or casting judgments in any way, any evaluation on that other person, I think is going to make things worse. So getting out of that headspace and into one of, well, what can we do? What can we do about it? How do we move forward? How do we shift? How do we whatever? And that's at least where we find ourselves now, and hopefully that's we'll stay there and we'll find a solution.
Yeah. And around the wobbly spiral, one thing I want to share from my experience is just how weird it is to take time and to really just to see how things evolve over time. Really, I've been out of this relationship for a while now, 3 or 4 years. And it's crazy how much things have changed over that time, and how, what they say about time heals all wounds. I don't know about that necessarily, but it definitely softens edges. And it definitely if done well, if time is used well, can slowly lead to that feeling of, I guess, what we're talking about, safety, the things that are needed, the curiosity, of equanimity, but especially that feeling of safety again. I do think some of that only comes, here's what I'm really trying to say. I feel like it's, looking at it intellectually is fine and is one thing, but some of it's so base. Some of it's truly just time spent together where nothing bad happens. I was just with my ex for an extended period this last weekend at a wedding, and it was cool. It was great to just be in a place and nothing bad to happen. You notice old reactivity come up. And I do think some of the way we process and some of the ways in which we heal is from something so simple as just time together in at least neutral circumstance. Positive, even better. Positive, even better. And then you can go to psychedelics and you could say in time in a really open, really good, and can maybe accelerate that. But at the very least, time, familiarity, closeness of the kind that you're available for, I think will slowly seed that ground of safety and make things easier. Give you the soil where you can plant seeds and then water them and then grow. It's a long-term game over here.
Yeah, I definitely don't. I don't subscribe to the time heals all wounds. I think time is a necessary component, but it's not the only component. If somebody physically abused you, just not being around them for a while and then being back around them, you're not going to be like, oh, cool, I forgot
Yeah.
all about those traumas. Like, doesn't quite work like that. But I do agree that the more positive experiences that you can create and have can like positively impact your perception of that person and your perception of what it means to be in space with that person. Again, so for instance, like what you're sharing about with, your ex and the amount of time that you spent around them, and you're essentially making new memories. You're essentially like, okay, this is different than it was before. And so that in itself creates a little bit of safety that wasn't there before, because you're like, oh, this is a new way of being around them. This isn't like the way I thought it was. So it's almost like if you hated eating onions and then somebody like shows you pickled onions and you're like, oh, I didn't know that onions could be like this. And so maybe it's not onions that I have a problem with, because this experience with onions is different than I've had before. So maybe it's not onion. Maybe it's, I don't like raw onion. I don't like onions in this capacity, but it's not the onion as a whole that I have an issue with. Similarly, like this perception that you have of a person, if you perceive them to be a certain way, maybe it's not necessarily them as a whole, but just the circumstances of how you experienced them at that time or those times. But now you can experience them in a different way, and it doesn't have to be the way that it was. You don't have to have the same, experiences or hurts or traumas or whatever.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I agree. It doesn't heal all wounds, but it is necessary. It's marching forward regardless, I guess. So, it's hard to know.
Yeah, whether you like it or not, there's going to be time. Like, time is going to be involved in anything that you do, for as long as we subscribe to this idea of time. Which, little side note, just to drop some of the heaviness here, but my son was asking me, because we were like, the weather's been really nice, and I'm like, yeah, fall is here. Fall has begun. The beginning of fall has happened per nature. Nature is beginning the process of fall. And we were flipping up our calendar to September this morning, and he was like, Dad, it isn't fall yet. Fall doesn't start until September 22nd or something. And I'm like, I don't think the trees really care what the calendar says. This piece of paper here, I think the trees and Mother Nature and our ecosystem is making fall start whenever it makes fall start. And as humans, we don't get to decide when fall starts. We have a good estimate of when roughly it starts based on like planets and when the sun starts to drop and whatever, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's when fall starts. And so it's just kind of funny, this like idea of time. And then he was also like, when daylight savings time ends, he saw that on the calendar too, and he's like, what does that mean? And I'm like,
That poor kid.
yeah, it's like, it's just a reminder. I think the reason why we haven't gotten rid of daylight savings time is they want to keep reminding us that time isn't real and we can just magically change what time it is all the time. It's like, hey, look, it's not real. How is it magically an hour later? Oh, because we said so. Magic. We can just change time. Like it
It's a good
doesn't.
reminder.
It's a great reminder. It's all made up. It's all silly, and it's not linear, and it's not even a constant. Like time is, they've shown and proven that time is
Yeah.
experienced at different speeds and rates for different people depending on how they're spending their time, where they're spending their time. And so like it's just it's a big illusion that we're all for some reason agreeing to subscribe to this one way of looking at it.
Yeah. It's like time is real, but the perception of the way in which time is
Hmm.
perceived for most of us and viewing that is stable is the illusion, is the thing that's not real, right?
Right.
There's time and it's relative, and if you've seen Interstellar, you can see some really good examples of that are really easy to process. But yeah, you can look at all kinds of other sources for that. But it's so funny you mentioned that. I was just fighting with Courtney about this last night. I was like, it's not fall. And she's like, go outside.
Right.
And I'm like, September 22nd. She's like,
Right.
go outside though.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Too
I
important.
noticed, I get it. And some people are putting out pumpkins and scarecrows. I'm like, guys, it's summer. What is going on? But
Doesn't
I
feel like
get what
summer.
it sure
Doesn't feel
doesn't.
like
Here
summer
it's
outside.
exactly the same as what you're saying. It really does seem like fall. So that's where I'm at. It was a good learning point for me because I was like, why am I so stuck to the calendar? And this is what I
Hmm.
said earlier about expectations and
Hmm.
planning and control. And it's something I know about myself. One of those patterns I'm just working with. Like I like some order and structure,
Yeah.
probably because I grew up without it. So I wanted to, so that's what I've had to impose my own structures and then adopt ones that are helpful. And so it's really funny to see myself just like, literally fighting nature. Like, who am I going to fight? Like, where am I going to stand my ground on this? It's still summer thing,
You like run outside with your calendar. Knock it off, trees.
What am I going to do? Like, start polluting the atmosphere to make it warm again? Like, what
What
am
are
I
we gonna
going to
do?
do? Like,
Seed the clouds so that it stops the sunlight
yeah.
from getting through?
I can try what I can try, but I hope I don't. I hope I don't go that far
Shout
off,
out Bill Gates.
fall off the deep end here for fall. Okay, well, this is we definitely started a good place. We had no answer. We wobbly spiraled around it, and I feel
Well,
a
we had an
little
answer.
closer to it.
We had an answer. The answer we got to was create a space. Do what you can do to create a space where there's room for safety, so that they can not have anything to combat. Right? I
Yeah,
mean, I feel like that's really
yeah,
the only actionable thing besides the other efforts that we talked about, like seeking a third party to facilitate a container, somebody who's trained and experienced in holding that space for those people with those types of traumas. And I mean, I think that's a great place to aim for, whether there's plant medicine administered or not. Just getting a third party involved in there that can help the two of you hear each other. That's a big part of what Helping the Herd does, and the coaches that work for Helping the Herd is all about helping facilitate a conversation between two people who aren't hearing each other. And I think this is exactly that situation. Not only are they not hearing each other, but they're also experiencing reality differently and are unable to communicate their experiences because they're not hearing each other. And so I think that that's another solution. So I mean, I think we have two for the listeners. If you're in a similar situation, the best thing you can do is try to hold yourself in a way that creates safety and doesn't create opportunities for conflict. Now, if the other person's committed to creating conflict, you can't do anything about that. But that's not your job. Your job is not to prevent the conflict.
Mhm.
It's to show up and hold space in a way where you're not creating it. They can create it all they want, but you're not creating it. And then eventually, hopefully, you can find safety. They can find safety when they're not bumping up against your combativeness or your, um, I don't know,
Yeah,
exacerbations or.
yeah. Reactivity, anything. Yeah. Wow, it's funny that safety is not a external circumstance. It is internal. There's people who feel safe in incredibly unsafe environments that most people would say are factually unsafe, and they're just fine. And then there's people who can, yeah, feel totally, just panicked in the safest environment you could imagine, a locked, padded room, I don't know. That doesn't make me feel
That
very
doesn't feel
safe.
safe at all.
It's all relative, guys, just like
Yeah.
time. So yeah, no, I like that. And the responsibility part's really what's shown through for me. And while we have answers, I guess I was pointing out, we have no one answer. There's no like right answer, and the path toward those is really the part that's really wobbly, But it's good to have a few stops along the way to help guide you. And I'm thinking about that connection to injury again, and just how healing is such a weird path. Even for physical injuries, I think it can be kind of surprising how it goes and what all factors happen, especially with joints like knees. It's such a closed box where you're like, what am I doing, and what other parts of my body need to activate to give this, and how do I avoid compensation injuries? Healing is just another thing we circle around, I guess, here, empowerment and healing, because they do kind of go hand in hand.
Certainly applicable in this scenario. There's healing that needs to happen in this co-parenting dynamic.
Yeah.
And with most co-parents, there's a level of healing that is needed. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I just keep coming back to that unconditional positive regard, which is also what you were saying, that holding that space without generating conflict. Hopefully, even with that, you're able to disarm conflict as it comes towards you, or at the very least, not add to it, and maybe remove yourself from the situation, whatever, the path of least harm is. But yeah, it's good ways to be. And seek help when needed. That's the other one, and seek help. We are all walking each other home. And so, yeah, I just can't highlight that enough for anyone who's listening to this and made it this far. Read Nonviolent Communication, watch Interstellar, the most important things. Don't let them tell you that it's fall until September 23rd. Fight, hold on. And finally,
Definitely cling to your perception of time. Don't. Yeah.
Desperately cling. And, and finally, just have a lot of grace for yourself with the reactivity that's going to be so strong for you. For Ian, for you with this person, it's going to be so strong. And once you get a mediator in there who's able to help facilitate that, I think it can help so much, because you take on a lot, and you do a great job of being pretty darn equanimous and working on yourself. And there's still the wounds that start so close are going to be really hard for you to bring full equanimity to. So seek professional help when necessary, as they say.
And control what you can control, which is how you show up. More than anything.
That's right.
On top of all of those things that we did talk about, and I agree with every statement that you made, above all of that, control what you can control, which is you and how you show up. You can't sit there and, be reactive and, pour fuel on the fire and be like, why are you acting this way? Like, you've got to control you, so that way you're not making things worse or feeding someone else's, fuel for their hatred for you, or whatever it is.
That's right.
Whatever their hurts are, or their traumas are, don't add to them. And the best way to do that is to show up in a way that's nonviolent and in integrity with yourself, though. Don't people please. So this is certainly not a time to violate your own self and your own integrity for the sake of keeping the peace. Not suggesting that, but I think there is a way to mindfully, intentionally move through these types of situations with someone who's in this place in a way that doesn't make things worse or poke their old hurts.
That's right. That's exactly right. All right. Well, I think we've had some helpful things here. And for anyone who's listening and is in this kind of situation, or knows someone who is, Helping the Herd does offer coaching support over the internet. Wherever you are, we can find you. We can pop onto a computer screen and try to help. And just like you pointed out with your situation, it is really hard when you're not physically located in the same place with the person of conflict. That's where this can be so helpful, being able to have some kind of a Zoom mediation or a Zoom coaching to help with that empowerment and that responsibility, that healing journey. So reach out, find us at helpingtheherd.com. Send us your questions if you just want us to talk about it more and give some more specific advice. Anything else, Ian, that you want to end with?
So one thing that I don't know that people know this or not. And again, if you've made it to the end of this podcast, God bless you. We appreciate you being here and, being a part of this evolving thing that Derrick and I are doing every week. But the website, the Helping the Herd website, if you sign up for get on the email list, or I think if you do the quiz, you put your phone number in there and the website will text you. And if you text that number back, you can reach a coach for free. So if you just have things that you have questions about, or if you want a perspective from a coach whose role is to empower and teach you how to be intimate, but teach you how to find intimacy and create intimacy and improve your communication patterns, you can do that for free, just texting the number that the website will send you. They'll send you a text and let you know, hey, do you need anything? You can text us anytime for free. So I don't know if everybody knows that or not, but it is completely free. And you can just text a coach, and they'll help you try to navigate whatever it is that you're experiencing.
That's wonderful. Low barrier, easy access. That's what I'm talking about. And knowing that Ian is probably the first coach who's going to be getting these, I can safely tell listeners you are in good hands. You're in good hands.
I feel us wrapping. Are we wrapping, Derrick?
I think I'm wrapping. I mean, right. You had the wrapping episode last week, but I can bust out a... No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, we're wrapping. No, this was great. Thanks for the wobbly spiral, the wobbly wrapping around a great topic. Thanks for your shares, and I'm definitely finding it useful, and happy to keep spiraling with you.
Yeah, man. Thanks for being here every week. Any questions, any suggestions for guests, contact at helpingtheherd.com, comment in the YouTube video or any of the Instagram clips, wherever you're hearing this. Post a comment if there's things you want us to talk about or people you want on the podcast or repeat guests. We're happy to bring people back onto the podcast, especially if you have questions for them. We'd love to get them back on and ask those questions. So reach out. Otherwise, we will talk to you next week. Thanks everyone.
Guys.
This has been the Do You Feel Heard podcast. If you're interested in resources that will help you move through conflict, you can go to doyoufeelheard.com, where we have tools for individuals and couples.